We'll finish our sequence of videos looking at root position, root motion by certain intervals by looking at one of the trickier root motion by second or seventh. The reason that it's tricky is due to the fact that utilizing similar motion in voice leading, in this case, will result in multiple parallelism issues as seen below. Let's take a look at this first example. Here we have a C major chord moving to a D minor chord, a 1 chord to a 2 chord in C major. Everything looks nice and smooth, which is what we've been going for in other root motions. However, because the bass is moving up by step, this creates a potential big issue. First, we see that there are parallel octaves between the outer voices. And not only that, there's also parallel fifths as well. So we can see that this will probably not work great. So rather than in moving in similar motion to the bass, we should instead strive to use contrary motion when voice leading this type of root motion. Specifically, we'll be taking the upper voices, the soprano, alto, and tenor, in the opposite direction to the bass. So in this 1 moving to 2, we see the bass moving up from C to D. So if the bass is moving up here with this root position, root motion by second, then we should have the upper voices moving downwards, which is what we have. SAT move down, and that means that we don't run into any issues. It's worth pointing out to remember that direct fifths and octaves are only present in outer voices. So your eyes might see that this upper voice is leaping down to an A, which creates a fifth with the alto voice here. If this alto voice had been in the bass, then this would have been an issue. This would have been a direct fifth. But it's absolutely fine to have this kind of motion if we're involving an inner voice. So we see the same issue if we are moving down, a root motion down by second. In this case, 6 going to 5. And we see first that we have parallel octaves in the outer voices and parallel fifths between the bass and tenor. So again, if the bass is moving down, then we want the rest to move up. And that's what we do. There is a leap involved in this, but that's absolutely fine. There's no issue with that. We don't run into any parallelisms here. A couple special cases. We should be aware of the deceptive cadence. Whether we're in major or minor, the deceptive cadence is one of the times that we actually want to have the third. It's because that third of the 6th chord is going to be scale degree 1. And it's going to help give us that aural pun, that aural joke that we are resolving, but not quite. And in fact, this is going to help us avoid an augmented second in the minor mode. So absolutely fine to have a doubled third here, and absolutely fine to have a doubled third here. And in fact, having B natural go up to C means that the B natural will not go down to the A flat, which would have given us that augmented second. Nice, smooth voice leading, and a doubled third okay in the context of a deceptive cadence. We should also continue to be vigilant when dealing with the minor mode because we can have that augmented second. Particularly if we utilize similar motion in the root motion by second and seventh progressions, we can run into those augmented seconds like we almost ran into just a second ago. So here we have a minor 4 going to 5. This works great, this first progression. We are moving downwards in contrary motion, which is what we should strive to do when moving by second or seventh root motion. However, if we start moving by similar motion to the root, then we start running into issues, and that's where we would get our augmented second here with the A flat going up to B natural. So be aware of those. Lastly, I want to talk about unequal fifths. When working with root motion by second that involves diminished chords, we may encounter what are known as unequal fifths. Unequal fifths occur when 2 voices have an immediate succession of either a perfect fifth followed by a diminished fifth, or a diminished fifth followed by a perfect fifth. Either way. Some texts and some theorists you might encounter that say going from a perfect fifth to a diminished fifth is okay, but not the other way around. Or that going from a diminished fifth to a perfect fifth is okay, but not the other way around. I'm here to tell you Bach does both. So I am less concerned with which one comes first, because these unequal fifths, they're unequal because one is perfect and one is diminished. It can go either which way, diminished fifth to perfect fifth, or perfect fifth to diminished fifth. The guideline that we want to follow is that at least one of the voices should be an inner voice. In other words, both voices can't be an outer voice, otherwise it starts to sound clunky. And we want to hear that tritone resolve inwards if it's in an outer voice, or a diminished fifth resolve inwards. So here we have a couple examples. We're in C major, and we've got our 7 diminished triad moving to 1. Here, in this case, we have a diminished fifth between bass and tenor, and a perfect fifth between bass and tenor. In this case, it involves at least one inner voice. It involves the tenor voice, remembering that our inner voices are our alto and our tenor voices. Our outer voices are our soprano and our bass voices. So in this case, this motion involves at least one inner voice, the tenor. So that is fine. It doesn't matter if it's moving diminished fifth to perfect fifth or the other way around, because we see Bach doing both. However, if it involves the outer voices, that's when things start to get clunky. So here we have the diminished fifth between the bass and the soprano. It's there in the bass and tenor as well, but what we see is that it's between the bass and soprano that we move to the perfect fifth. So we're going to hear that slight clunkiness, that slight non-idiomatic sense of the style in the outer voices. Our attention will be drawn to them, and that's going to feel awkward. What we like to hear is hearing that diminished interval resolve inwards. Diminished intervals tend to resolve in, augmented intervals tend to resolve out. In other words, we see both of these voices proceeding by step inwards towards each other. The F moves down to an E, the B moves up to a C. And we have that happening here too between the bass and the tenor. The B and the F goes to the C and the E. It's just that we have this additional issue of the B and the F going to the C and the G, creating these unequal fifths in the outer voices, which adds a slight clunky nature and takes us out of the idiom which we were so faithfully following up until then.